Spider-Man Far From Home is the 23rd movie in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and the 23rd of these films that I've made an appointment to go see in the theater as soon as I possibly could. This second Tom Holland-led Spider-Man sent my thoughts spinning not only to the implications to future installments, but it also got me thinking about the nature of Bible prophecy, and I've just gotta share that with you to see what you think. So, fair warning, this video contains serious spoilers for Spider-Man Far From Home, not just little ones. I'm going to be spoiling major plot points and twists that will definitely greatly diminish your enjoyment of the first viewing of the film. If you have not yet seen the movie and you care at all about plot details, turn away now. When the theme song ends, it's going to be spoiler time. You've been warned. Here comes the song. Welcome to Paulogia, where a former Christian takes a look at the claims of Christians. If you're new to the channel, take a second to tap on the subscribe button so you can be notified when I post new videos on the topics of science, theology, news, and sometimes comics and movies. The Bible doesn't lean on time travel literary devices in the same way Avengers Endgame, Back to the Future, and Terminator do, but many Bible fans praise its prophetic elements, a form of time travel in its own regard. Upon reflection, it occurred to me that the Christian Holy Book and Spider-Man Far From Home play with literary time manipulation in many of the same ways. Let's review. First, and most innocently, is foreshadowing. The mildest of all prophecies, foreshadowing is clues left intentionally by the writer that might lead an insightful reader or viewer to possibly predict a plot twist. For example, arguably the biggest Far From Home twist is revealed in the movie's final end credit scene, where Nick Fury and Maria Hill are revealed to have actually been shape-shifting Skrulls through all the events just witnessed, specifically the Skrull characters Talos and Soren, whom we met in the Captain Marvel movie. Now, careful watchers might have been able to guess something was up with some of the out-of-character behavior by Fury throughout the film. The Fury we know is hyper-suspicious, ever-confident, and always prepared. Yet, Far From Home Fury is easily duped by Mysterio's fake backstory. Can't seem to talk to the Avengers, or even Peter.
You sent Nick Fury to voicemail? I gotta go.
Doesn't seem to know what to do. Seems overly eager to rely on a 15-year-old kid, and gladly puts Peter's classmates in harm's way. When Fury's good friend, Captain Marvel, is mentioned, the imposter wants nothing to do with it. Most obviously, at least in hindsight, Skrull Maria Hill refers to Fury as Nick. Something he famously does not tolerate.
Everybody calls me Fury. Not Nicholas, not Joseph, not Nick. Just Fury.
Now, when we see foreshadowing like this, are we startled and wonder to ourselves what supernatural power of prophecy the writer must have had to be able to write such clues and have them ultimately pay off later in the story? No, that's absurd, right? Obviously, our writer has in mind the ending of the story while writing the start of the story. So why then would one make an appeal to prophecy when elements of a gospel story foreshadow later events that happen in the same gospel? When in Matthew 12, the writer had Jesus say, "For as Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of a huge fish, so the Son of Man will be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth." Or the author of John having Jesus taunt some doubters, saying, "Destroy this temple and I will raise it again in 3 days." These are not independent corroboration that Jesus made such predictions. The most obvious explanation is that the writers made use of a common literary device of foreshadowing. Next up is Mysterio's right-hand man, William Ginter Riva, portrayed by actor Peter Billingsley, who is most famous for his role as Ralphie in A Christmas Story. We are no sooner introduced to Riva than we're shown a flashback clip from Iron Man 1, grounding Riva as the scientist who is berated for not being as good as Tony Stark.
Honestly, it's impossible.
Tony Stark was able to build this in a cave!
As a major theme of the film is Peter's struggle with the burden of becoming the next Tony Stark. What better way for the writers to affirm this conflict than to make the villains of the film be people who had connections to Tony all the way back to the very first movie? Similarly, the gospel writers pulled in all the favorite characters from the past to solidify that legacy. Jesus is to be the new Adam, the last man to his first man. Jesus connects himself with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and at the Transfiguration, Moses and Elijah literally show up in a cameo and talk to Jesus for a while. Of course, none of these appearances needed to be authorized or approved by the Old Testament writers. The New Testament crew just dusted off the characters and gave them new story and dialogue to lend authority to their new characters. And finally, Mysterio himself. In the comics, Quentin Beck's backstory has always been that of a special effects wizard from the movie industry, who then uses his silver screen skills to create illusions in the real world for nefarious purpose, often attempting to appear as a hero while attempting to make Spider-Man seem to be the villain with the help of J. Jonah Jameson. Sound familiar? Sometimes being a comics fan can ruin some of the movie surprises. But in the twist reveal scene, the film wisely also wanted to connect Beck's character to the looming shadow of Tony Stark. But unlike Riva, they didn't have an established connection they could already make. Instead, they had to retcon him. Retcon is short for retrocontinuity, and describes the phenomenon of introducing new information that imposes a new interpretation on previously described events. In this case, they went back to a scene from Captain America Civil War, where Tony is demonstrating world-class holographic technology that he's using for mere therapy, and give us new information telling us that Beck invented that holographic technology, even digitally inserting actor Jake Gyllenhaal into the scene to make it look like his character was there the whole time, just slightly off frame. But, of course, we know that the writers of Captain America Civil War didn't have Quentin Beck in mind when they were writing the script back in 2015. This was a development from later Far From Home writers in 2018. As seamlessly as it may seem to fit, that's thanks to the effort of the sequel, with full hindsight, not thanks to the foresight of the original. I see a pattern of retcon all over those who claim that the New Testament is a fulfillment of the Old. One of the most obvious is the serpent from the Garden of Eden. For centuries, the tempter of Eve had been nothing more than a cunning creature, like any other creature. Then the author of Revelation decided to retcon the serpent as Satan himself. And suddenly, one can interpret Genesis 3:15 as talking about Satan killing Jesus, but Jesus ultimately defeating Satan. This is purely a retcon. The authors of Genesis didn't intend that character to be Satan, and the Jews who lived before Jesus certainly didn't interpret it that way. Similarly, the "in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God" Logos portion of John 1 intended to place Jesus at the creation of the world. Don't worry, everyone. Jesus was always intended to be there, just slightly off frame from the Father. The same is true with many of the passages pointed to as Jesus prophecies. Isaiah 53, Daniel 9, Micah 5, Hosea 11, Jeremiah 31, and on and on. Passages that cannot be reasonably read as intending to be prophetic, but later retconned to also be about Jesus by the New Testament authors. How do I know that this was their intent? Because they tell us themselves. At least 22 times in the Gospels, the writer uses a phrase like, "and so was fulfilled," then quotes something from the Old Testament, seemingly out of context, that the Jesus story allegedly fulfills. They were deliberately, desperately attempting to add information for reinterpretation of these old passages. They made no secret they wanted to make such a connection. Foreshadowing, callback characters, retcon. 3 effective storytelling techniques on display in Spider-Man Far From Home, and we recognize them as such. The New Testament is the most successful sequel of all time, so why don't Christians recognize these same storytelling techniques in their book?